The job didn't make sense for a warehouse that barely shipped anything at night. I found it close to midnight. After scrolling for longer than I should have, the listings all started to blur together. Morning shifts, day shifts, minimum wage. Then this one showed up. Warehouse intake supervisor. 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. The hours didn't bother me. Warehouses run late all the time. But one line made me stop scrolling. They were specifically looking for someone who didn't speak Spanish. I read it again, slowly, because it felt like I had misread it. I grew up speaking 2 languages, English and Spanish, and the town this warehouse was in, most people spoke it too. So why would that be a requirement? I didn't have an answer, but the number at the bottom was clear, $30 an hour, for a job that sounded like sitting at a desk and checking shipments. I closed the other tabs, submitted my application, and made one simple decision. I would pretend I didn't understand. They replied within hours. Not days, not weeks, hours. They wanted me there the next night. That should have felt strange. But I needed the money, and when you need something long enough, you stop measuring what feels off. First day, the warehouse was bigger than I expected. Bright overhead lights, long aisles, shelves stacked almost to the ceiling. A heavy-set guy greeted me at the entrance. Friendly, too quick to laugh. We shook hands. He talked a lot, like he was trying to make everything feel normal. I started to relax a little, until someone stepped out from between the shelves. Taller, thinner, moving without any rush. He walked straight up to me. No greeting, no smile. He started speaking in Spanish. Fast, casual, like small talk. I understood every word, but I just looked at him, blank. A few seconds stretched longer than they should have. Then I turned to the first guy, pretending I didn't get it. They looked at each other and laughed like something had just been confirmed. The tall one finally smiled, held out his hand, said he was just messing with me. I nodded, laughed along, but something in my head didn't laugh with them. They walked me through the place, explained the job, received shipments, logged them, watched the loading dock. All normal until the last part. If anyone showed me a blue plastic card, I was supposed to unlock a back room. They called it secondary storage. The room wasn't big, but the door was thicker than the others. No windows, auto-locking. I didn't ask questions. They didn't offer any. I just had to unlock it, then let them go in. The first week, quiet, a few trucks, normal inventory, no cards, no one going into that room. If it wasn't for the weird language requirement, this would have felt like any other job. Until one night, a guy came in alone. Backpack. Didn't say anything. Just showed me the blue card. I walked to the door, unlocked it. It opened slowly. He stepped inside. The door shut behind him. Locked. I went back to my desk. Kept working. About an hour later, he came out. His bag looked fuller. Not by a lot, but enough to notice. He didn't look at me. Just left. I didn't ask. There wasn't a reason to. Not yet. After that, it started happening more. At first one person, then two, then groups. Always the same card. Always the same room. Always something slightly different when they came out. Bags, small boxes, or just the way they held things. At the same time, shipment got strange. Not big freight, not pallets, small things. Frequent. Too frequent for a place that looked quiet from the outside. I started noticing more, not out of curiosity, more because it was hard not to see the pattern. And then there was the money. Sometimes drivers would hand over cash. Extra fees, they said, but the amounts didn't make sense, and they overpaid. A lot. I tried giving it back once. They shook their heads, like it wasn't a mistake. Like that was the point. I called my supervisor, Told him something didn't add up. He answered fast. Too fast. Said it was normal, then hung up before I finished talking. My sentence just stopped halfway, and for the first time, everything lined up. Small shipments, night deliveries, blue cards, that locked room. My mind landed on one possibility, and wouldn't let it go. I didn't have proof. I hadn't seen anything directly, but pieces of conversation started coming through clearer, in a language they thought I didn't understand. Numbers, locations, names. I sat there, looking like the most clueless person in the building, while probably being the only one actually listening. The strange part, I didn't leave. Every night, I told myself it was the last one. Every night, I came back. The money was too easy, too steady, and I never touched anything directly. I just opened a door, logged shipments, watched. That was it. I convinced myself that was far enough away, that I wasn't really involved. Until one night, something shifted. A worker almost got crushed by a rack. Not a major accident, but close enough. His footing slipped. The load tilted. My body moved before my mind finished deciding. I pulled him back. Boxes dropped. Hard. A second later. It would have been different. People gathered, clapping. Too fast. Too in sync. Like they needed something to celebrate. A man came up to me, gripped my shoulder, thanked me. Only then did I realize it was his son. The next night, they were waiting for me. At the entrance, faces I recognized, including the ones with blue cards. They handed me a drink, raised glasses. One of them gave a speech in Spanish. The others laughed. I smiled with them, but it wasn't a thank you speech. It was about money, about people they were ruining. I told myself I was mishearing, but I wasn't. I should have left then. My mom called me in the middle of a shift. She never called unless it mattered. I stepped away from the main floor, answered, and without thinking, I spoke in Spanish. Fast, natural, like always. The call didn't last long. I hung up, turned around, and he was already there. Standing in my path. No footsteps. No warning. Just there. He looked at me, didn't blink, didn't smile. The same face as the first day, just without anything covering it. He asked how long I'd known Spanish. His voice was calm, clear. I answered too fast. Said I was just learning, practicing, not really fluent. The words sounded right, but my body didn't agree. My hands were cold. My heart was too fast. He kept looking at me, like he was weighing something. A few seconds, or longer, hard to tell. Then he just said, "Okay," and walked away. I went back to my desk, sat down, but not really. My body was there. My mind wasn't. Every possibility ran at once. They know. They don't know. This is a test. This is the end. I didn't move, not because I chose not to, more because my body didn't know how to leave without looking like I wanted to leave. A few minutes before my shift ended, he came back, more relaxed, like nothing had happened. He told me to come in an hour early the next day, said there was a new opportunity for me. Then he slipped cash into my hand, more than usual. I nodded, because it was the only safe response. I went home that night, and I never went back. For months after, I couldn't sleep right. Every car outside felt too close. Every truck slowing down. Too slow. I'd wake up without knowing why. Just the feeling that something wasn't supposed to be there. I started checking the locks more than once. Sometimes standing by the window, just to make sure no one was waiting. Even now, there's one thing that hasn't gone away. I still listen, especially when people think I don't understand. I don't react. I don't turn. I just hear it. And every time someone says something they shouldn't, my body is already getting ready. before my mind knows why. I don't know if they actually knew that night, or if they almost knew. I don't know what would have happened if I showed up early the next day. What I do know is this: pretending not to understand can put you too close to something you were never meant to understand. And once you do, there's no way to go back. At first, I wasn't too worried that I'd hiked through rain plenty of times, and it usually passed quickly, but within less than an hour, the wind started to change, not normal wind. Small trees were bending sideways, and I could hear branches snapping the canopy above. The temperature dropped fast enough that I stopped to add a layer. By the time the rain started, I was already soaked. I was on an exposed section of trail and no significant natural cover anywhere close. Lightning was striking nearby, and I was carrying a metal frame pack on my back, AT elevation. Not a situation I want to stay in. I kept moving, scanning left and right, looking for anything I could use as shelter, and then I found it. A small structure behind the trees, off to the left, dark, nearly hidden by brush, but clearly man-made. Single story. Small today, as I got closer, I could see it was an old cabin, maybe a former hunting shelter from an era long past. There was one window on the side I was approaching from. I almost ran toward it. The door opened. Inside, dark, but dry to chair, a small table, and a cot frame pushed in the back corner of the stone fireplace on the right, filled with old ash and debris. The smell was bad, very bad. I didn't care. I pulled off my wet clothes and lay down on the floor just like that. Not because it was comfortable, but because I was inside, I was safe from the lightning. That was the only thing that mattered. Maybe 10 or 15 minutes passed before I really started looking around. With the rain raging outside and nothing else to do, I switched on my headlamp and began examining the cabin more carefully. There was more there than my first impression had suggested. In the corner near the cot frame, there was a sleeping bag rolled up neatly. Unlike everything else in the cabin, it didn't look old, didn't look worn. There were also a few cans and a water jug on the table. My first conclusion: someone was using this cabin as a base camp. Maybe a hunter, maybe another backpacker. Not strange. But something in the back of my head didn't immediately accept that explanation. I kept looking. Then I saw the scratches on the wall near the door. At first I thought it was just ordinary damage from age or weather, but when I brought the headlamp closer, I could see clearly. There was an irregular pattern carved into the wood. My first thought was bears. The Appalachian isn't unfamiliar territory for black bears, and claw marks on old wood aren't unusual. I was almost relieved to have a rational explanation. I didn't think about it any further until I saw the window. I walked over to it. The glass was still intact, which surprised me given the age of the cabin. Then I saw why. There were screws driven into every corner of the frame, locking the window shut. Also, from the outside and around the frame, on the inside, there were more scratches. These were different, deeper, more deliberate in their own chaotic way, if that makes sense. Not wide and sweeping like animal claws. These were narrow, parallel, repeated in the same spots over and over, like someone had tried desperately and repeatedly to open that window with their bare hands, with their fingernails, with fingers that had probably long since run out of strength. I stepped back from the window. Bears don't make marks like that. Bears don't try to turn screws from the inside. I went back to the door, opened it briefly, even as the rain came in, just to examine the mechanism from the outside. On the outer edge of the frame, there was a metal bracket designed for a padlock. From the outside, no matching latch on the inside. I stood there for a few seconds, letting the implications sink in slowly. This door could only be locked from the outside. Someone had been kept here, not trapped by accident, kept deliberately held. I should have walked out right then. I knew that. I even stood up and looked toward the door, but outside, the rain had turned into a wall of water. Lightning was still striking, and part of my brain started building the argument that whatever happened in this cabin was long in the past. The scratches looked old. Even the sleeping bag that seemed newer was stiff and dusty when I touched it. I chose to stay. To this day, I don't know if that was a decision that saved me or the one that almost killed me. I can't say for certain how long I sat on the floor of that cabin after that discovery. Maybe an hour, maybe more. The rain didn't let up. The sound of water on the roof was so loud I could barely hear anything else. Barely. The first sound I caught was a kind of scraping or dragging along the outside of the left wall, slow to unbroken at first. I thought it was a branch being blown against the wall by the wind, but I tried to remember if there were any low branches on that side. I couldn't remember. Then two heavy impacts on the front porch floor. Not the sound of rain, not the sound of wind. Point to impact with a pause between them, like footsteps. I stood up. I did what I think most people would do in that situation, that I froze and my eyes fixed on a random point on the wall. I tried to sharpen my hearing. But if there really was someone out there, any sound they were making was completely swallowed by the roar of the rain. What bothered me most wasn't the sounds. What bothered me most was the thought that maybe the sounds I'd heard were only a small fraction of what was actually happening outside, and the rest had been swallowed by the storm long before I could catch it. My eyes moved to the window. I couldn't bring myself to look through it, that if there really was someone outside. They were almost certainly looking in. I stayed still for a long time, until slowly the tension began to ease. I started convincing myself it was just a storm, or at worst, an animal moving around the cabin. I almost managed to convince myself. Then pressure on the door, like someone leaning the full weight of their body against the outside of it. The wood creaked. The latch rattled once, and then the pressure released. My heart stopped for a moment, and the part of my brain that had been busy constructing rational explanations suddenly went completely silent. All that was left was one question, spinning very fast. Why would someone outside, in the middle of a storm like this, circle the cabin, knock on the walls, press against the door, but not come in? The door wasn't locked. Nothing was stopping them. They didn't want to come in. They wanted me to stay inside. I don't know if that conclusion was right, or if my brain was spiraling into paranoia. I didn't wait to find out. I started packing my carrier as fast as I could, hands moving before my head had finished deciding. There was a heavy nausea in my chest, a physical certainty that something very bad was about to happen within minutes. I wasn't wrong. I was maybe 30 seconds from the door when the window glass shattered behind me. I turned around. That was the only thing I had time to do before the entire room caught fire. Not a fire that grew slowly to a fire that exploded. The right wall lit up almost all at once. The heat hit like something solid, like a hand shoving hard against my chest. That I moved the door and pushed. It didn't move. I pushed again, as hard as I could, and this time the door gave way, tore completely off its hinges, and I fell outside with it. I don't remember getting up. I only remember running. No direction, no destination, just running away from the light and the heat I could feel on my back, even from a distance that should have been far enough. I don't know exactly when I became aware of it. Maybe after 100 meters. Maybe more I am between the sound of rain and the sound of my own ragged breathing. There was something else, a sound that didn't match the rhythm of the storm. Footsteps on wet ground, moving through brush, going the same direction I was running. I didn't stop to confirm it. I didn't look back. I just ran faster, and the sound stayed behind me, not closing in, but not disappearing either, like a shadow that couldn't be outrun. I don't know how long I ran before the sound finally blurred into the roar of the storm, and I couldn't separate it anymore. I didn't stop to check. I kept moving until my feet started catching on roots, until breathing felt like inhaling embers. until I couldn't run anymore and was reduced to stumbling between the trees. Somewhere in the dark, two large fallen trees had come to rest against each other, leaving a narrow gap underneath that blocked most of the rain that I crawled in and collapsed back against wood, knees to my chest, ears straining to catch anything beyond the sound of rain. No footsteps, or maybe there were, and I just couldn't hear them anymore. I didn't move for a long time after that. I don't know how many hours I spent under those trees. Time didn't mean anything out there. What finally made me move was a simple thought. If I stay still, I'd die. Whoever was out there wasn't going to go far, and I couldn't hide forever under a pair of fallen trees. I stood up and started walking, and oh idea where, just away. I can't tell you exactly how I got out of that forest that night. I still don't understand how I managed it. I was soaked through and couldn't think clearly, but I found a trail by chance and just followed it. When the rain finally started to ease, I could begin to recognize where I was. I made it to a trailhead. The first person I found drove me to the hospital. 2nd-degree burns on my left arm and the back of my neck. The doctor said I was lucky I hadn't inhaled more smoke. Nothing permanent, but the pain lasted a very long time. My wife was there when I came to the hospital. She didn't ask many questions that night, but her eyes kept asking, and I didn't have an answer that made enough sense to give her. I told her I got lost, there was a fire, I made it out. That was a version she could accept. That's the version I've kept ever since. I never told her the full story. Not because I don't trust her, but because part of me knows that if I did, if I told her everything, I'd have to truly admit that I myself don't understand what happened that night, and that's harder than it sounds. Once I had recovered and was back home, there was one thing I kept turning over in my head. An old wooden cabin deep in a forest, soaked by hours of rain, does not burn like that, and it's not possible. Not that fast. Not completely. Unless the wood had been treated with something beforehand. Someone had prepared that cabin before I was ever there. Someone had made sure that if a person walked in and the door was locked on the outside, one object thrown through the window would be enough to end everything. What I still don't understand, even now, is the timing. I entered that cabin because of the storm that I wasn't planned to be there. Nobody knew I would pass through that part of the forest. And so why was someone already waiting? Why not just walk in and lock the door from the outside? Why knock on the walls? Why press against the door? Why did they need me to choose to stay inside on my own? I filed a report with the police, gave them everything I could. They listened. Nothing more than that. I stopped solo backpacking after that. My wife thinks it's because I grew up and got more responsible. Maybe that's partly true, but the real reason is this. To this day, if I wake up in the middle of the night and can't fall back asleep, I don't think about the fire. I don't think about the footsteps that followed me through the trees in the middle of that storm. What I think about are the scratches. The ones on the window frame. The ones on the wall near the door. And the question I've never been able to answer, how many people have been inside that cabin before me? And out of all of them, how many made it out? The door didn't close because something was standing right in the middle of it. I hadn't even fully looked up when it happened. My head was still down, music still blasting in my ears, my fingers still moving across my phone screen, reviewing something I don't even remember now. That day felt normal. Too normal. I had just finished school. A Wednesday. Cold, but not cold enough to make people rush home. I remember that because I wasn't rushing. I had time. I always had time on that route. The train was mostly empty. Not unusual. Sometimes it's like that at that hour. I was sitting near the door. Same spot as always. Right side, close to the pole. I wasn't paying attention to who got on or off. I wasn't paying attention to anything. When the train stopped, my body was already standing before I consciously knew why. It was routine. Same station. Same movement. Stand. Step. Exit. I didn't even check the station sign. The doors opened, and my steps stopped. Not because I decided to stop. More because something didn't allow me to move forward. I noticed it first from the edge of my vision. Something too colorful for a place that gray. I lifted my head, and he was already there, standing right in front of the doorway. Not getting in, not getting out, just standing. His clothes were too big. The pants hung loose in colors that didn't belong there. His red shoes were oversized, like they weren't meant for walking, more like props. His face was white, not normal white, uneven, like it had been wiped off and reapplied in a hurry. Red nose, blue lines above the eyes. I didn't see a wig. I remember that clearly. His hair didn't match the rest. My mind stalled for a few seconds. Not because I was trying to understand. More like my brain refused to process what I was seeing. I knew I had time. I knew the doors would close. I knew I had to get off. But my body didn't move. He didn't either. He wasn't trying to get on. Didn't say anything. Didn't make space. Just stood there, as if his only purpose was to be exactly where I needed to pass. I moved first, or more accurately, my body did. I tried to squeeze past him from the side. The contact lasted a fraction of a second, and the moment it happened, he moved fast, too fast. He leaned down in one smooth motion, like he already knew when I would touch him, like he had been waiting for that exact moment. Now his face was level with mine. Too close. I could see cracks in the makeup. I could see the skin underneath. I could smell something strange. Not sweat, not cologne. Something damp, like fabric that never fully dried. My hand had already pushed him before I realized I was doing it. My foot had already crossed the threshold, and I ran. I didn't look back at first. Not immediately. I just knew I needed to get away from that door before it closed. I didn't finish that thought. I ran along the platform, my shoes hitting the ground too loud in a space that felt too empty. After a few steps, I looked back, and he was already moving. He wasn't walking. He was chasing me. The way he moved wasn't right. His stride was long, but the rhythm was off, like his limbs weren't fully in agreement, like there was a slight delay in each movement. But he was fast, faster than he should have been. And that's when I saw his hand. There was something in it, something that hadn't been there before. A knife, a regular kitchen knife. Too ordinary for a situation like that. And maybe that's what made it worse. I stopped thinking after that. The stairs were ahead. I ran up immediately, 2 steps at a time. My hand touched the railing, but I don't remember when. I just know my legs kept moving. Behind me, the sound was still there. His footsteps. Close. Not close enough to grab me, but close enough that stopping wasn't an option. I didn't look back again. Not because I didn't want to. More because I wasn't sure I'd keep moving if I did. I reached the street. The light felt too bright. The city noise came back. Cars. People. Everything felt normal. Too normal. I stopped, not because I was safe. More because my body finally decided to stop. I turned back. The stairs were empty. No one came up after me. No red shoes. No bright colors. Nothing. I reported it. Of course I did. Police came. They went down to the station. They asked questions. I answered as best as I could. Repeated the same details. Clothes. Face. Knife. They nodded. They wrote things down. They said they would check the cameras. They said I was safe. I believed them. Or at least I tried to, because the alternative didn't make sense. Nothing else happened after that. Not that day. Not that week. No follow-up. No news report. No arrest. No one came to my house. Logically, it was over. But there's one thing that never really went away. Not his face. Not his clothes. Not even the knife. What keeps coming back is the moment before I touched him. The moment when he hadn't moved yet. When he was just standing there. Because the more I replay it, the more something feels off. At first, it was small. Almost nothing. But now it's hard to ignore. He didn't look like someone waiting for a train. He didn't look like someone trying to get on either. His position was too precise. Right in the center of the door, facing inward, facing me, as if, no, I don't go there. I tried to remember more clearly. The train was nearly empty. I was sitting near the door. If he had been inside the car before, I would have seen him. If he got on at the previous stop, someone would have noticed, or at least the cameras. I told the police that. They just said they would check. They never came back. There's one more thing. Small. Too small to mention at the time. But now is the worst part. When the doors opened, he was already there. Not stepping in. Not approaching. Already there. Like the door opened toward him. Not the other way around. I try to explain it to myself. Maybe I wasn't paying attention. Maybe he was fast. Maybe I panicked. All of that makes sense. It should. But my body doesn't react like that without a reason. My body stopped before I knew why. My body pushing before I decided to. My body ran before I thought. As if something recognized him first. Something my mind never had time to process. Now, I never stand too close to the door. I always wait until it fully opens. I always look outside first, not just a glance. Really look, and I never wear headphones on the train anymore. Never. Sometimes, when the doors open and there's no one there, I still wait 1 second longer, just to make sure that there isn't something already standing there, waiting for the door to open, facing inward, facing me, and not moving.